Let's talk about one of the first and simplest words we ever learn, no. Seems pretty straightforward, right? But what if I told you that the way you say that one little word could reveal a whole lot more about your life than you'd ever imagine? Today, we're diving into some fascinating research from Brazil that shows how no can hold hidden clues about our society, and maybe even ourselves. So let's just ask it outright. What does the way you say no actually say about you? You might be thinking, not much. But linguists in Brazil started noticing something really curious. It turns out there isn't just one way to do it, and the different ways people choose seem to draw a kind of hidden social.
You see, in Brazilian Portuguese, there are 3 common ways to stick a no into a sentence. And this isn't just about your tone of voice. It's a real grammatical difference that native speakers use all the time, probably without even thinking about it. Let's break it down.
Okay, so here are the 3 contenders. First, you've got the standard preverbal noun. It comes before the verb, kind of like we do in English. Simple enough. Then things get interesting. There's a postverbal form where the noun gets tacked on to the very end of the sentence. And finally, you have the double no, which is exactly what it sounds like, one no before the verb and another one after. The huge question for researchers was, who uses which one and why?
Well, this kind of variation just sparked a ton of questions, and of course, a few popular theories. Sociolinguists wanted to get past the stories and the stereotypes and find a real, data-driven pattern. So they basically set up a linguistic investigation to test some of the most common beliefs about who speaks which way. And here are the main suspects they lined up. First, was it a regional thing? A classic North versus South linguistic divide. Second, did gender play a part? That's a super common factor in language variation. Third, was it about age? Maybe a sign that the language is changing over time? And last but not least, did a person's level of formal education have anything to do with it? These were the puzzles they were determined to solve. Now, to crack a case this big, researchers knew they needed a really powerful tool. So instead of just doing one more study, they did something smarter. They decided to look at all the studies that had already been done. It's kind of like assembling a team of detectives who've all been working on different pieces of the exact same mystery. And that tool has a name. It's called a meta-analysis. It's basically a way to mathematically combine the results from lots of different scientific studies to find a bigger, more reliable answer. It helps smooth out the weird quirks you might find in any one study and lets the strongest, clearest signal shine through. Here's an easy way to think about it. If a single study is like polling a few hundred people, a meta-analysis is like a super poll that combines dozens of those polls into one massive one. And that gives you a much more confident, much more solid conclusion. And believe me, this process was tough. Researchers started with this huge pool of 149 different studies. Then, they applied some really strict criteria, filtering them for quality and for having the right methodology, until they were left with just a core group of the absolute best, most reliable studies to combine for their analysis. This systematic approach is really what gives the results their power. First, you define your question. Then, you search for all the evidence. You code it all the same way, you filter out the noise, and only then do you run the numbers on this big, high-quality, combined dataset. All right, the investigation is all set up, the tool is ready to go. It is time to crack the code. What did this powerful super poll of language studies actually find? Well, let's just say the answers were not what a lot of people were expecting. Okay, first hypothesis on the stand, the regional one. Was there a clear difference between how people talked in the Northeast versus the Southeast of Brazil? Was that double no really a northern thing like everyone thought? So just take a look at the visual evidence right here. Each of these bars represents a different study, from both the North and the South. And what do you see? I mean, it's pretty obvious, right? That giant purple section, that's the standard before the verb, no. And it is overwhelmingly dominant in every single one. The double no pops up, sure, but there's no clear pattern that says this is from the North or this is from the South. And the verdict is in. The whole idea of a simple North versus South divide for this way of speaking, it's a myth. Busted. The data just doesn't back it up. The way people say no is actually way more consistent across regions than the stereotype would have you believe. Okay, so if it's not about where you live, maybe it's about gender. I mean, this is a really common factor in sociolinguistics. Lots of studies find differences in speech patterns between men and women. So let's see what the data has to say about this. This chart here is called a forest plot, and it's actually pretty easy to read. See that dashed line right down the middle? That means zero effect. The closer a study's dot is to that line, the less influence gender had. And just look at them. Almost all the dots are sitting right on or super close to that center line. So the conclusion here is crystal clear. For this specific way of speaking, gender is not a significant predictor. The meta-analysis found its influence was low, or in most cases statistically, well, non-existent. So another popular idea bites the dust.
Okay, so we've ruled out region and we've ruled out gender. That brings us to our final and maybe most interesting clue. What about formal schooling? Does the education system, with its focus on a standard, correct way of speaking, actually shape how we say no?
Whoa, the evidence here is pretty striking. This first set of data from a study in rural Bahia shows that using the double no jumps from about 25% among semi-literate speakers to almost 37% among illiterate speakers. That is a really big jump. Now, let's look at a totally different group of people in the massive city of Sao Paulo. Here, we see the exact opposite trend happening. Use of the double no is already pretty low, around 7% for people with a high school education, but it drops even more, down to just over 4% for university-educated speakers. The pattern is just undeniable. And here it is, the smoking gun. This is the researchers' own conclusion, right from the paper itself. After they combined all that data, one factor stood out with clear, powerful statistical significance: education. So, after busting a couple of big myths, what have we actually learned? The final takeaway from this whole linguistic detective story is really about which social forces are powerful enough to leave a real, measurable mark on the very grammar we use every single day. So, case closed. The idea that this was all about a north-south divide or about gender, that turned out to be a total red herring. The reality, which was revealed through this incredibly rigorous analysis, is that the single strongest social predictor is your level of formal education. And this makes sense, right? Schooling hammers home a standardized form of the language, influencing speakers to prefer that more standard way of saying no.
And this leaves us with one final, much bigger question. Because this was never just about the word no. It's a powerful example of how our language really works. The way we speak isn't random. It's like a living record, a subtle reflection of our path, our experiences, and our journey through the structures of the society we live in. So what else are you revealing when you think you're just talking?